people treated the message we put out and the controlled opposition to try to keep that suppressed, it has reached millions and millions of people around the world. And I just want to give a huge shout out to you and the network for being able to, number one, find a way to make this emotional and powerful, because it is a very powerful message that everybody should know and it should not be suppressed. Since that's been released, every day it is 10, 12 hours of me actually looking into documentation, research studies, finding that this isn't new. They've been working towards creating envenomation worldwide, finding ways to use venoms and propose them to be toxins, and at the same time propose them to be cures in the form of antiviral drugs and antiviral vaccines. From the very beginning, the individuals in Wuhan that got sick in the fall of 2019, when the Chinese doctors took the blood of everybody in the hospital, they ran their antibodies to see what are the antibodies directing themselves to. Is it a virus? Is it a poison? What is it?
We're hearing about this outbreak being linked to snakes. How so?
So yeah, Dave, Chinese scientists have analyzed the genetic sequence of the virus, and it really appears that snakes like the Chinese krait and the Chinese cobra may be the source of the deadly coronavirus. They concluded this after identifying that the 2019 NCOV was a mix or recombination of two coronaviruses. One was known to infect bats, but the other had origin that was unknown. After considering other animal hosts, scientists concluded that it may have come from snakes.
The genetic origin, they said, was of the krait snake's venom. Second most likely origin was the king cobra's venom called cobra toxin. That's what they said. I didn't publish that. That's what they published. And then in April of 2020, French scientists in France, geneticists, actually took the spike protein and ran its gene sequence and then published their findings. It turns out it was the king cobra's venom, called a cobra toxin, was the actual spike protein. And they ran the sequence again, and they found it was identical to the krait snake's venom protein called bungarotoxin. So here's another country 4 months later running the spike protein that you're aware, right? COVID-19's virus isn't the deadly part of COVID, it's the spike protein.
COVID-19 is not a virus, in fact, at all.
Right, it's actually simply venom. The farther you look into this, you know they're actually replicating all the symptoms of COVID, telling the world it's a virus, when in fact every single symptom of COVID can be specifically pinpointed at a specific protein found in a venomous creature's venom.
Losing a battle with COVID-19, it's like having rattlesnake venom running through your body. At least, that's what researchers are telling us.
We found evidence that there was an enzyme, a snake-like enzyme, in the blood of people who were dying in extraordinarily high levels.
They actually told you in April of 2020, this is not a respiratory pathogen. These spike proteins and venoms cross the blood-brain barrier and attack the central nervous system, the part of the brainstem that controls breathing, and it will make the individual hypoxic. They will actually start to have difficulty breathing with cough. They will have fevers, chills, malaise, like you see with COVID. They think that this is a respiratory pathogen.
I gotta ask, if this has been published, peer-reviewed, if from the very beginning they've been saying this is what this is, why do we have quote-unquote trusted experts, the self-proclaimed inventor of mRNA technology, Dr. Robert Malone? Why do we have Dr. Peter McCullough, the chief scientist at the Wellness Company? Why do we have Dr. Pierre Corey? Why do we have Dr. Paul Merrick? Why do we have all these doctors, trusted experts, saying, protect yourself from a respiratory virus? This is what you need to do. Why do they not subscribe to the Brian Artist truth that this is envenomation? Why?
It's been very odd to me. What is the why? It's interesting because they refuse to talk to me about their why. They won't meet with me, talk with me. They avoid the actual presentations on stages.
Wait a minute. The people that I just named specifically avoid you. But don't you share a stage with them? I mean,
they often will excuse themselves from the events when they find out I'm speaking. Since Watch the Water Drop. Pierre Corey, Paul Merrick.
Have you given them the data? Have you shown them the studies?
Yes, I've actually presented it to them, gave it to them. They still refuse to look at it, I guess.
What do you mean refuse to look at it?
I've given it to them, told them to read it and get back with me. None of them have ever talked to me. Even the researchers I gave it to. Here, look at this, and tell me where I'm wrong and where these people are wrong. In their peer-reviewed, published publication.
Isn't a medical doctor's job, by very definition, to research, to read, to review, to study, to diagnose, and to treat.
That's supposedly what they took on.
So these people who are the leaders, a few of which we just mentioned, and I don't care who you name, we want to know, we deserve to know who these people are,
Yeah.
have said to you, I refuse to listen or review the paperwork. And I just want to be very clear here, they refuse to even look.
Oh, I'll tell you what Pierre Corey said. He said I was a manning chiropractor and that my documentation was a waste of his time. He got into an hour and a half worth of watching my documentations, said it was a waste of his time, and has never looked at it again. Really, the same information I gave all of you with Watch the Water, releasing that to the world, I gave you all the information to actually substantiate all the claims. And it's a waste of your time. Their behaviors show nothing but cowardice. If you are going to profess to be a leader of men and women in this country and try to save their lives, why aren't you looking at the actual weapon? All of you who continue to deny wanting to talk about venoms being COVID, shame on all of you. If you would go back and look at the studies that were published in April of 2020, they tell you you're wrong about the target, that the receptors they're actually targeting with the spike protein, they tell you it's ACE2 receptors is what you guys keep telling everybody. That's not what it is. It isn't ACE2 receptors. And if you think it's ACE2 receptors, why was it published in April of 2020 that ACE2 receptors are absent or devoid in the lungs themselves? If this is a respiratory pathogen, how is it published in April of 2020 that ACE2 receptors aren't even in the lungs? If that's how this virus gets inside of your cells and causes a lung pathology, and you're going to say the receptors are ACE2 receptors, but they don't exist in the lungs, why do you keep preaching that this is a lung pathology?
Why do they?
Do you know the antidote that we listed when I said in April of 2020 the French researchers found the genetic sequence of the spike proteins that causes disease to 28 different tissues in the body? Found by the Salk Institute, the spike proteins, not the virus, by themselves cause disease to 28 different tissues in the body. When they realized and published in April of 2020 that the receptor targets on the cells was not ACE2 receptors, it was actually nicotinic acetylcholine receptors all throughout the body. The antidote from the beginning of these researchers in April of 2020 was everyone around the world needs to start doing nicotine substance studies. We don't care if they use patches, we don't care if they use nicotine pouches, nicotine gum, it doesn't matter. A nicotine agent will protect people from COVID. It is the perfect antidote. The targets are nicotine receptors.
Now we are all under more stress, which means people who smoke might be lighting up even more. At first, experts studying COVID-19 thought smoking was a major risk factor, but now they're not so sure. 13 on your side, Sarah Makuta talked to local experts about a new study out of France.
When you take information that's published since April of 2020, and our governments, and then our federal health agencies, and then our mainstream media lie to the whole world that smokers are at the highest risk for COVID. Even today, they say.
Data collected by French scientists suggests smokers are less likely to catch the coronavirus. The experts we talked to said this is not the case.
Fake. That is totally fake. That is not true whatsoever. The actual lowest demographic of people that are getting hospitalized or dying from COVID are smokers. It is less than 2% worldwide. In April of 2020, the researchers in France said, we know there's this respiratory virus going around the world right now. 95% of the people in hospitals should be smokers, but they're not. It's actually less than 5% at that point in April of 2020. And they then said it must be the nicotine that's binding to these receptors that the spike proteins are targeting. Venom peptides target nicotine receptors. That's what they do. And to help people understand this, so this is the two terms. There's a term called antagonist and agonist. So antagonist, obviously, when any substance is an antagonist and it actually hits a cell on the outside of it that has a nicotine receptor, it's called nicotinic acetylcholine receptors. When an antagonist hits it, it shuts off the cell's function. So for example, if you have a nerve in your tongue that actually tastes, that's its job as a sensory nerve, it's designed to substantiate and determine taste. When a venom hits it, or an antagonist, it shuts off that nerve's function, which is to taste. And guess what happened with COVID? People lost their taste. If it actually hits, the venom hits, or an antagonist hits the olfactory bulb, which controls smell, it will shut off that nerve's function to smell, and you'll lose your taste and smell. What about hearing? You get venom in your central nervous system, and it hits the nerves that control hearing. Guess what people get? You shut that off, and you get ringing.